And so going back to the painting, you realize you and I have entered an age where it doesn't really matter how much pain lives inside you and how loud you scream. No one really cares. And no one can care. Life is far too busy for most of us. And even if it wasn't, none of us in this class really want to be around another human being for too long. We just don't have the capacity for that anymore. Anyways, Adam knows that he has lost something very precious. He's also aware that he is mortal. His time is short. And he wants to suck the marrow out of life. And by that, it means he wants to go back to the Garden of Eden. And if the Garden of Eden is a metaphor that's far too religious for some of you, think of it this way. Long time ago, you wrote a set of poems. You would go home after school or after work, you'd make yourself some food, a cup of coffee, or a glass of water. You would go into your room, lock the door, dim the lights, and spend 5-6 hours writing poetry. You were self-sufficient. You were creative. You didn't have to read books to inspire you. Inspiration oozed out of you. You were like God, creating things. But because we are human animals, we have all sorts of deficiencies and needs and wants. All of a sudden you realize you're no longer the carrier of inspiration. You now hold within you fears. Fears: if I don't go to work, I won't get money. I'll be evicted. I want to call my parents, my boyfriend, my girlfriend. My body needs some exercise. And the moment you step out of your space, inspiration goes away. And of course, when you leave, you say, okay, I'll just go and exercise for an hour. I go back home and write some more poetry. But the problem with inspiration is you have no power over it. It's like a god. It comes when it wills. It doesn't care for your desires. You have no power over gods. And so you have to wait and you wait and you wait. And while waiting, you write poetry only to realize it just doesn't smell right. So you have to wait and wait and wait. 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, you say, I remember those days when I used to sit and write poetry. That is the station of Adam. He wants to just simply be in the cradle of inspiration, creativity. But he's come to realize something. For him to go back to this place of inspiration, he must overcome forgetfulness. We have physical needs, i.e. sex. Nothing wrong with that. And while you are having sex, you will have emotions that are pleasant or feelings that are pleasant. And one of the nice things about pleasure is that it has such a force that it propels you, pushes you into the present. You don't think about anything. In 1979, when I went back to Iran, after having been stationed in India for a couple of years, I remember the revolution was taking place. And we were doing marches every single morning, thousands of people, every day on the streets. On a few occasions, these trucks, military trucks, would pull in, soldiers with machine guns would come out. I was a young kid. But you see, when there is a mass movement, when there is a revolution, you're no longer an individual having your own pathetic infantile desires. You want things that Plato talked about, justice. You don't need to read books. The revolution consumes you. And as a 10-year-old, you look at the soldier and you say, shoot me. I don't mind dying. My parents are justice, and I don't mind sacrificing my life for justice, do you see? And that's what inspiration does. It pushes you into the present moment. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. You are fearless, and you're willing to sacrifice. What is it that Adam is looking for? Beauty. What lives inside beauty? Perfection. Not perfection of the body. Not perfection of feelings and emotions, because they can come and go. Not perfection of ideas, because ideas can change over time. And you suddenly don't want to live in the cradle of trauma, because it's devastating. For Adam, perfection means stability of the soul. And I know the word soul is a concept that's a little foreign, alien for us in the 21st century, because we are secular people, secular culture, secular emotions, secular thoughts and ideas. Okay? So now the question is, how do you overcome forgetfulness? You have to remember. How do you remember? These four worlds, the physical, the emotional, intellectual, and psychological, they're like drugs. It's like when you smoke and everything disappears. They have this hypnotic power over us. You may have signed up for this class because you truly love philosophy, but now the only thing that you're worried about is your grade. What happened to your desire, to your love for philosophy? It went away, overtaken by your fear of not graduating. And what happens when fear overcomes you? You come to my office. You don't say, I love philosophy. You say, how can I pass this class? And what do I say? Well, how much money you got? Because you ain't got a brain. And then like Judas, you sell your soul for an A or a B or a C. Yeah.
For things you have on the board, that'd be like where Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, you could say that. That you need the basic goods of life or basic needs, you know, but you also need health to take care of those basic needs. You also need, it's not enough for you to just simply have shelter and live by yourself. Because at a certain stage in life, you say, I just want someone to have food with me. I want someone to sit with me and watch a movie. What's the use of having a shelter but no companion? What's the use of having a companion but having no love? What's the use of your family liking you but society hating you? It takes a very, very mature human being with proper foundations to be able to be qualified for things that transcend the basic human function. If you want self-knowledge could be defined in a couple of ways. Have enough knowledge of who you are on a physical stage. Have enough knowledge of who you are on an emotional stage. Examine your emotions. You're angry, examine it. Why? That's self-knowledge. Have knowledge of what lives inside the content of your intellect. Don't just believe in garbage. Know why you believe them. If they have any practicality in your life. If you can actually apply them. Go out there. You know, bend over for your boss and for your superiors. See what they do to you. Now, you may think that's bad, but the ability to compromise, to have a tough day at work and go home and yet be smiling to your parents, to your friends, to your kids, to your husband. These days, that is a function of superheroes. And once you have made peace with your body, with your emotions, with your intellect, with whatever trauma may live inside you, and you are basically a relatively healthy, functioning member of society, then something interesting will happen. You say, I go to the gym every day. I'm a vegan. I have food, shelter, and clothing. I'm good to my parents, good to my husband and wife, good to my kids, good to my neighbor. I pay my taxes. I feel like Adam now. I feel like I'm a stranger in a strange land. I want to go back home. I love my wife or my husband, but I want something different. I love my kids. I want something different. And all of a sudden you realize you're like the Buddha or like Jesus Christ. You want to leave. But you can't find a home just yet. Your home is going to be the desert. Loneliness, depression, anger, because society, your parents, yourself deceived you into thinking that food, shelter, clothing, companionship, they are the foundation of life. And they were at a certain stage. You're different now. So before any of you in this class go and listen to Eckhart Tolle or Sadhguru or pick up the New Testament and go out there and say, man does not live by bread alone, self-examine a little. What is your physical bread, emotional bread, psychological bread, intellectual bread? Do you have them? Yeah?
The whole idea of just like punches and like just smiling when you come home. Isn't that? I know that's a very American way of thinking.
No. It's actually not an American way at all. If there was, they wouldn't have mass shootings. Sports wouldn't be so violent. There wouldn't be therapists.
I would say so. It's like
Passivity has been part of the human culture for thousands of years. Thousands of years. Middle class is about 200 years old. Most of us are poor. We have been warrior people for thousands of years. Urbanism, capitalism, the way you see life today is relatively new. People survive being in a bad marriage, remaining invisible, and yet sustaining life. I'm not in favor of abuse of any kind, no. But what I'm trying to say to you, people remain calm on the inside. They allowed life to continue. It's not like today. All lives are just like have a flat tire. They're stranded in the middle of nowhere. Now, let me just twist this a little bit. Since we are creatures who forget, think of it this way. In Genesis, God first creates Adam, and he is happy, and Adam is happy. One day, God is just walking around, looks at Adam, and you know what he sees? Sadness. How could Adam live in Garden of Eden, where he has everything, but he is so sad? So you know what God does? Puts him to sleep. Grabs a rib and creates Sheva, i.e. Eve. If Adam is earth, Eve is life. But life is hidden in the belly of the earth. Life is forgotten in the belly of the earth. How do you bring life to the surface? You need a serpent. For the longest time in human history, symbolic for healing qualities. When the serpent appears, who does the serpent speak to? Adam or Eve? She. The serpent speaks to Eve. Why? You see, Adam has ears of the head. Eve has ears of the soul. The serpent is about rescuing, salvaging the soul, not so much the body. Serpent talks to Eve, convinces Eve. Eve, now consumed by the messages of the serpent, now has a task of convincing Adam. And what you have in this story is the following. If you are a person of body, mind, emotions, you will, like Adam, become bored. That is just given. That's the default function of every human life. Read Immanuel Kant. Read Arthur Schopenhauer. Read all the great philosophers and psychologists. You will get bored. You will be put to sleep. And like Adam, you will wake up at 2 a.m. and you will cry, I want to come to life. Is there a book out there? Sigmund Freud used to be so fascinating. No longer is he. Oh, I read Das Kapital. It was wonderful. I pick it up now and I want to vomit. Is there anything out there that can bring me to life? And the only person, the only entity that can bring this memory of inspiration of Garden of Eden is a serpent. I.e., as the Hindus would say, that's the domain or the space where teachers live. There is something about the presence of teachers. Something about them is like, you know how diamonds are made, right? They're in the belly of the mountain. Hundreds, if not thousands of years of pressure. And they become indestructible. There is something about the presence of Socrates. Something about the presence of Jesus, Muhammad, Lao Tzu, Malcolm X. They force us to remember. What we remember, we don't know. But we hear something. And we hear it not with the ears of our head. Now, do you have any questions? Of course. Thomas.
So, do you think that everybody is traumatized to some degree?
Somewhat?
Traumatized, psychologically traumatized to some degree in life? About because of that? Some like less, some more, but there's like a certain feeling that.
You know, there are a couple of things when you speak about trauma. Trauma involves an event in life. All events, small to big, they have to be processed. How you process them has to do with the way you interpret them. How you interpret an event has to do with the culture in which you live. It also has to do with your temperament. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? It also has to do with the force of this experience. Was it sudden? Was it gradual? Okay? So there are lots of things to consider. I've mentioned plenty of times that poverty is not new. to human beings. Violence is not new to human beings. Disappointment is not new to human beings. Suffering is not new to human beings. But for some strange reason, beginning early 20th century, pain is really, really difficult to have within. You need help. Well, if you ask your grandparents, they had no running water. They had no electricity. They had nothing, and yet they survived. They thrived healthily in body, mind, and soul. Today, the most advanced country on the planet, America, has the sickest number of people. Why? Because no one has ever been sick on this planet. No one has ever had bad experiences. There is something about us and our interpretation of life and the culture that creates certain narratives that are just poison. No one married to be happy. Now we married to be happy. No one wanted to be in a relationship because they want to be in love. Now we have to be in love. And what happens? Well, disappointment is going to be waiting for you, not too far away. And then you have all these new age garbage on YouTube. Be creative, be authentic, be this, be that. Come on, man, just live an ordinary life. Before you can be creative, just have a 9-to-5 job for a couple of years. Be in a relationship that demands work and effort and sacrifice. Just, let life push you around a little bit. Grow a thick skin. Then when you get tired, it's not good if you have zero money to just badmouth money. Money is bad. Money is bad. Oh, yeah? How much money you got? Nothing. If you happen to be Donald Trump, you have billions of dollars, and you say money is bad and you walk away from it, well, it's because you've understood money. You've understood pleasure. You understood power. And there comes a point where you say, I want to be a self that's good without money, without power, without pleasure. I'm looking for something different. Now, that is a good walking away. That is a good bad mouthing of money. Today, everybody is poor, but they're filled with bumper stickers. And I know bumper stickers. You know why? I come from a third world. You want to stand in line to buy a gallon of milk for 5 hours? You know what people talk about? Bumper stickers, justice, God, compassion, forgiveness. You know what revolution is? A bunch of people getting together and shouting bumper stickers. That's what it is. It's a bubblegum culture. Big on the outside, empty on the inside. You guys have made me upset.
That's how it goes, man.
Sound good? Yeah. I wanted to blame you guys because blaming myself is a little difficult.
That was a smart question.
Stop it. Do you have any questions or comments? If you have time for a couple of quickies.
How to become a guru?
A guru? A teacher? Well, it's a good question. It's just a difficult question. There is this wonderful scene in one of the writings of Plato. I think it's called Symposium, if I'm not mistaken. It's about love. And there are all these old people sitting and they ask Socrates, can you tell us a little bit about love? And Socrates, he's a chest thumper. Yeah, I'll tell you about love. And then, he stands there and he rails and shouts and screams what love is and what isn't. And man, people are happy because he's inspiring them. At a certain point, Socrates catches himself. He remembers. He says, I'll be right back. And people say, where are you going? I'll be right back. Where are you going? Continue with your talk about love. It's beautiful. I'll be right back. Socrates goes out, finds a corner, it's dark, and he cries for hours. And very much like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane or some garden, he says, Father, forgive me, for I did not know. It's not they didn't know, I didn't know. When people ask me about love, I realized I had been sitting in the corner. I was feeling irrelevant, invisible. I was yearning for someone to ask me a question so I could become visible. And the moment they asked me about love, Socrates came to life. But it was the wrong Socrates. It was the wrong self. Let me go back in there. Have Eros, Aphrodite, Venus, Philo, Sophia go inside me. Let them speak through me. Let the spirit of love use me as a vehicle. And then he goes in. And man, his prayers are answered. And he opens his mouth, and everybody is now intoxicated because of Socrates. Now, so you have someone who is used as a vehicle, and you have someone who basically has a lot of information and is gifted with a good amount of animation. And these are two different people. Okay? One, you could say, if you have that particular bent about you, one, you could say, is chosen by the God, the Socrates, who is consumed by the gods and now talks of love. And then you have a Socrates who feels invisible, who wants power like all of us do in class. He just wants to say things and have people worship him. There is also another aspect. I know I haven't really answered your question about what one needs to do to become a teacher. But you also have a young teacher and you have a seasoned teacher. A young teacher is someone who is in love. It's their first time. And they walk into this world with a great amount of hopes and dreams and fantasies. And they assume that because they're in love, none of the lives, contaminants or toxins will ever enter to poison what they feel on the inside. Then you have a seasoned teacher who will never allow such emotions to overtake him. He or she understands the anatomy of love, knows the inner world of love, and how it expresses, manifests itself outwardly. Now that is a seasoned teacher. And to be good at anything, you don't have to talk about being a Socrates. To be a good chef, to be a good pianist, to be like Walt Whitman and write well. All these require sacrifice and training. And what they all demand is for you not to give up. But for you not to give up means you need to have this passion that every time you want to put your pen down and just walk away, the passion won't leave you alone. Say, Jamal, stay with it. No pain, no gain. And it keeps pushing you and pushing you and pushing you until you attain perfection, according to your capacity. The making of a teacher, I don't really know how they're made. You know, when you say, how do you make a good student? How do you make a good teacher? That's a cultural thing. In other words, because America is a how-to culture, how you make this and how you make that and how you make this other, the assumption is, how do I now make a Jesus Christ? And how do I make a St. Paul? And the truth is, for the longest time in human history, they've always been a mystery. They've remained a mystery. No one knows. Yeah.
I wanted to know what you think about there's been some modern discourse about why we don't hear about people, at least not too much. We don't hear about people from the past who have mental issues. There's been some talk, as one of the explanations is that people who had more extreme mental health issues just died, didn't last as long as everyone else. How do you feel about the validity of that?
You know, when you read the Gospel of Mark, something interesting happens. There's this kid who comes in And he destroys things, he screams, he shouts, and the father goes to him and says, Satan lives inside him. Can you perform an act of exorcism so Satan can leave his body so I can have my son back? Says, fine. Today, that's called a mental illness of sorts. You don't, contact the Pope and ask for a priest to come and perform an exorcism. You cannot take him to the hospital. We have now scientific methods where he's put in a machine, his brain chemistry examined. So as science improves, some of the myths, some of the sort of spiritual, religious narratives, they go by the wayside. And we are able to look at such issues in a very scientific, rational way. There are lots of, I think, different components in your question. First, it's the first time that people are able to live to get to 90, 100. We've never had that in our history, which means that now you're able to see how our neurons, how our bodies function at the age of 90. And so if, for example, you as a son, your father would pass at the age of 40, which meant that you didn't really have to take him to a nursing home or take care of him. Now at the age of 90, you have a whole host of issues. What the hell do you do with dementia? What do you do with a father who can't walk, who can't talk, who can't do anything? So we are confronted with things that we didn't know in the past. So a good amount of it really is shrouded under an avalanche of mystery. We don't know. So it's a complicated question, and I don't claim to know.
Can you argue stories from like Paul about that kid who was saying that they could very easily just be fables, like the history we want to remember instead of exactly what happened?
I don't like the Dalai Lama. I think he is hollow in many ways, and he should have never been in that position that he is, even though he's done a lot of good for his people and other people as well. But if we are nothing but collection of stories, and if stories can either inspire us or depress us, I rather have stories inside me that inspire me. If the story you will find in the Gospel of Mark will make you more religious, more compassionate, where you're able to sympathize and empathize with other people, hang on to that story and hang on to it tightly. Because if you lose that, it's not just the story you're losing. You're losing your religious sensibilities, you're losing your compassion, you're losing your empathy, you're losing your sympathy. And it's going to take you a long, long time for you to recover.
Like,
in other words, reality is no fun. It really isn't.
I still feel like it's a dishonest to the human condition, not just sticking with these romanticized.
Yes, I know, it's a place of young people. No 18-year-old looks at the father and says, Dad, you have such a wonderful job. Dad, you're so wise. Dad, you're like a messiah. Every kid looks at the father and says, what a scum. His job sucks. He can't speak well. He's always tired. What sort of a man is he? Just wait till you get to be 30, 40 under an avalanche of responsibilities. At least your father has the decency of keeping his mouth shut when he's angry. You, on the other hand. Yes. I'm sorry?
What are your life loves? Love and life.
Coffee?
Well, it really depends on, when you're 18, forgive me, and it's going to be somewhat raunchy. When you're 18, you just love to have sex, a lot of sex. Then at the age of 25, hopefully, you still love sex, but what you really love is sex with meaning. So when you have sex, you don't want to walk away with guilt, with shame. Not because the other person has caught you. You have caught yourself. Then at a certain stage, you say, sex with meaning is good, but I really want like a bona fide relationship, marriage. And what I'm trying to suggest is that at different stages of your life, because of the changes you go through, psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually even. You demand certain amounts of perfection for yourself. And so if at the age of 18, sex was the ultimate perfection for you, now sex is 50% of perfection. The other 50 comes with meaning. Then when you get to be 35 or 40, you say, sex and meaning is good, but I want stability. I want a marriage. And then, of course, sometimes you scream at your wife or your husband because you're just a little bit of a savage. Then you say, I want my marriage to be relatively harmonious, even though there are always going to be wrinkles in life. And now your perfection is sex, yeah, once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe twice a year, right? Being good to my wife, to my kids, and then, having a job that pays the bills. Then at a certain stage, you look at your life, and very much like the Hindus say, around 50, 60, you have paid your dues to society, to your wife, to your kids. You say, before I die, I want to tend to my own soul. I want to just retire. I want to figure out who I am, what I am, beyond the things of the flesh. And then your spiritual quest begins. So there is no one answer. At different stages, you have different questions and therefore different answers, different journeys, different poverties. It's good to see all of you. Before I forget, May 13th, I'm not quite sure when that is. It'll be our last day, and we'll continue our class via Zoom. For those of you who want to get on Zoom and just have a conversation of sorts, that's how we'll gather. I won't be here, so we'll just do it via Zoom, if that's okay. Have a nice weekend. It's good to see all of you. Stay healthy.